Hello and welcome to the Life After Diets podcast. I'm Sarah Dosanjh, psychotherapist and author of the book, I Can't Stop Eating.
And I'm Stephanie Michelle, binge recovery health coach. If you feel out of control around food, we get it because we've been there.
Thank you for joining our conversations about how to make peace with food and feel more comfortable in our bodies.
Now on to this week's episode. Welcome, friends. And just a note before we get started, I wanted to let you know that if you're struggling with your body image, I'm running my annual body image workshop this summer. And this workshop is designed to help give you practical tools and techniques for body neutrality. These are the things that I developed when I was going through my own journey, body image journey process. And these are things I still rely on to keep my head on straight when I'm feeling comparison or grief or just upset that just happens from time to time. So the workshop focuses on things like how to handle photographs, mirrors. It offers cognitive reframes, empowerment exercises, journaling. We also talk about somatic regulating tools. And we this year have 2 bonus guests who will be talking about and leading us through exercises on embodied movement and clothing and fashion. So we have lots of good stuff. We begin July 5th. If you can't make the calls live, they are all recorded so that you can replay and watch them again and again throughout the year. And the details to join are in the show notes. Now on to the episode.
Hello, dear listeners. We are very excited about today's episode and next week's episode because we have not one, but 2, and both, or 100% of the founders of intuitive eating. Today, we're going to be speaking to Elyse Resch, and next week, we've got Evelyn Triboli on the podcast. Last week, Sinead Crow very kindly shared with us how intuitive eating transformed her life and her relationship with food. And over the next couple of episodes, we are going to talk to the founders and creators of intuitive eating to hear it from the original source about intuitive eating, what they think of it, what's their favorite intuitive eating principle. You'll hear about this and much more in this week and next week's episode. So we hope you enjoy. Well, we want to tell everybody about this.
Okay, you want to start again?
Yeah.
What's that book? What's that workbook?
It's the intuitive eating workbook for teens that I wrote, and it's my favorite. I mean, maybe I shouldn't say that, but it's my favorite because I put so much of my spirit into it, and I spoke in teen language to teens out there and the teen in each of us, because each of us has a reactive, rebellious teen. I'm pretty old, and I have the most active teen in me. I just know you tell me what to do, and I'm like, no, I'm not going to do it. So I really help my clients tune into that part of them and understand why they're reacting, because intuitive eating is all about autonomy. And when we're being told what to do, when an external force is letting us know that they know better, we're going to react. And that comes from the very healthy part of us. It's a healthy part of our ego.
Yeah. So. And you mentioned that you do inner child work. So
I do. Yes. A lot of it.
So much of that intersects with intuitive eating. And in my own process of all of this, I'm interested in that workbook because the teen is the loudest part of me. And it seems to be the most unresolved. It's got a lot more angst. So that you wrote a workbook for teens that is also widely applicable to all of us really is a great resource.
And I think a lot of people don't realize how mentally healthy that part of them is. You know, they think that, oh, what's wrong with me? No, there's something really right with you, especially when people tell me, oh, I've been dieting and I just, I failed at my diets. And it's like, no, your diets, are coming from some external force. And so it's a sign of your healthy ego that you reject the diet because you just do not want to be told what to eat or told that somebody else knows better what's best for you. So to me, it's a healthy part of the ego.
Yeah, I love that. I'm so looking forward to this conversation today, Elyse, and I really, really appreciate you taking the time to come and talk to us. We put it out to our community members that you were coming on the podcast and got some quite excited reactions. The opportunity to ask questions about intuitive eating from one of the OGs is just too good an opportunity to pass up. We've got a couple of questions from our listeners. We've also got a few things because Steph and I have both personally used the principles of intuitive eating and with our clients as well. I did the training with Evelyn. Did you do the training with Evelyn as well, Steph? Yeah. So we both did the training with it. So there are a few things I'd love to put that to Elyse and just see what her comments are, because they're things I hear from my clients all the time. And I'm really curious just in terms of how you might respond to them.
Let me say this before you go on. There's a supervision part of it that a lot of people decide to do individual supervision with me so that they get the training from both of us. But I think the group supervision is, what Evelyn offers, which is very wonderful for people who want to be part of a group learning experience. So just throw that out there in case there's any potential certification people out there.
Absolutely. I think first question I've got in my mind, what is the most frustrating thing for you in terms of how intuitive eating is misunderstood? Because I hear that misunderstandings all the time because it's so nuanced, right?
Well, the most important piece is that people look at intuitive eating as a means toward weight loss. And it is not a diet. The goal of intuitive eating is not weight loss. And then they interpret it as the hunger fullness diet. That's the other piece that just makes me crazy, especially in the eating disorder treatment community when people say, oh, no, they're not ready for intuitive eating yet. And it's like, well, hello. Hunger and fullness are only two of the principles of intuitive eating. There are many other principles that can be worked on from day one of treatment, including challenging diet culture, diet mentality, making peace with all food, respecting your body, working on coping mechanisms for your emotions. I mean, there's so much about it that is available right off the bat. So, yeah, those are the things that just drive me crazy that people think.
Understood. Hopefully we'll unpick them a little bit.
So one of our community members asked, I would love to hear your thoughts on where to begin with intuitive eating at the earlier stages of recovery, when your relationship with food and body is still very distorted and listening to your body is so confusing.
Yes. And that really feeds quote unquote, right into what I was just saying. I like to ask people a question in the beginning. And the question is, do you believe you deserve satisfaction in life? And this is a deep question. And I have had clients who go, well, no, I don't. And that's work they need to do with their therapists to understand why they're not feeling worthy enough to have joy and satisfaction in life. Most people do say, well, sure. And I ask them then to look through a lens of satisfaction when they're starting intuitive eating. It doesn't matter if you're not at a place where you can trust your body signals about hunger or fullness, but you can know whether your eating experience is satisfying, and you can set it up in a way that is going to be most satisfying. For example, choosing the foods you really love without judgment about the foods, staying present while you're eating so that you can really enjoy that food and not just kind of, pass right by it and not know that you've had this wonderful meal. So I say satisfaction. That's the place to start with it. And don't worry about the hunger and fullness. That will come over time when your body is more healed, when you're more nourished. So just don't go there. Go with satisfaction.
I feel like that's a big deal for you to say, like coming from Elyse, like to say, don't worry about hunger and fullness. And I think that that's so important because that's where people are getting hung up in my experience from hearing people like, that's where the focus is the hunger, fullness, and not being able to get that right. Those cues just aren't there necessarily always in the beginning of a journey like this, especially after years and potentially decades of having disorder around food.
Absolutely.
And yet it's the first piece that people feel like they're failing with. And to your point,
let me say this. I'm sorry, I interrupted. Let me say this. If I have my way, if there is another edition coming up in the editions, I would really flip the principles even more. I've already gotten satisfaction moved up on the principles. We changed them a bit, but I think it needs to come well before you ever talk about hunger and ultimately fullness. And fullness, you can't even begin to think about fullness until you have really gotten past a sense of food insecurity, whether you live with it or whether you've created your own food insecurity by not allowing yourself to have. How can you honor that moment when your body is comfortably full when you're scared you're not going to get enough or you're not going to get what you really want? So let's move. It's going
to help so many people who are trying to do intuitive eating perfectly.
Thank you. Yes, and that's the other thing. Intuitive eating is not about perfection whatsoever. So don't go there.
Yeah. When you said satisfaction, then Elyse, like my heart I was like, that is my favorite principle. And I always say to people, that was where I started actually, because I found that as long as I could keep myself in a relatively calm place, that if I just prioritized satisfaction, that had like a balancing effect for me.
Right.
I also want to share with you how I found intuitive eating, because I think it's a bit different to how a lot of other people do. It was 2010. So it wasn't being spoken about on social media. I never read an article about it. I never heard it from anybody. I was in Bournemouth, a little coastal town in the UK, in a bookstore, and looking through the self-help books, because we were all in the books then. We didn't have social media to help us figure out our eating disorders. And I saw the book on the bookshelf. And it wasn't even a particular, the cover's much nicer now than what it was. I think it was like a beigey color or something like that. And I picked it up and I remember reading it and going like, oh, okay, well, I haven't tried this. And so I bought the book and I, excuse the expression, devoured the book and went, this is it. Like, this is my answer. I was so excited and I jumped straight in, that all or nothing thinking, jumped straight, I'm going to do all of this. And I had been binging every day for months. And then I had 2.5 to 3 weeks where I didn't binge. And I was like, this is it. I found the answer. And then I had a day when I did. And there was no other resources or anything around that I was aware of at the time. And so the book got thrown away, not thrown away literally, but thrown out for another few years until I came back to it again. But I sometimes see people treating intuitive eating almost like another diet, as in you're on the wagon or you're off the wagon.
Exactly. And it's not that at all. It's a process. And I have your listeners can't see this, but I have a model that I've called a spiral of healing. And I say that the process is that the momentum is always upward. And there's these moments when it looks, for your listeners, it looks like a coil. And when the coil goes around itself, those are the moments when you get to experience some behaviors that you had in the past, some coping mechanisms that you had in the past. And so many people say, oh, I blew it, this doesn't work for me. But no, that's the most wonderful opportunity for learning. You're able to sit back and say, oh, that's so interesting. I had a binge that day, huh? Well, I didn't really eat enough during the day. I was super hungry, or I got that old thought, oh, this is food I shouldn't eat, forbidden food. And maybe I better eat it all right now. Let's just look into it and learn from it. And I like to say, come from a place of curiosity, not judgment, because it's a wonderful learning experience at that moment. So yeah, it's a process. It is absolutely not all or nothing or linear.
Yeah. I think I really learned that over the years. And I did a video on YouTube, or top intuitive eating mistakes. I've made them all. And one of them, which was the big one for me, and I hear it again and again from people as well. It's like, okay, intuitive eating, here we go. This is what I'm doing. And I would feel balanced and free for like a couple of weeks. But then I would notice, oh, my weight's coming down a little bit, because I'd been binging so much before. When I was feeling more regulated, my weight was, I think, kind of naturally coming down a bit. But then I would get excited about that. And it would hook me back in. The minute I saw intuitive eating impacting my weight, then I started overthinking. I became much more invested in my food decisions again, overthinking them again. And then like the binging would start again, because I was trying to must keep this up.
Sure. And that's why weight loss is not a piece of this, and to honor the fact that your body knows what it needs. And if you keep the weight out of the picture, then you'll just let yourself move to a place of homeobalance, I like to call it, where your body is happy and you're happy. And I don't know if anybody still has a scale, but my biggest recommendation is take an axe and smash the scale, because the numbers on the scale are just very triggering for people, one way or the other. You see it go down, and just as you said, it's an idea comes into your mind. I'm going to keep this up. I want to keep losing, because that's so much what diet culture tells you is the ideal. And then you set up that, well, this is how I think of it. You set up this fear of future deprivation, because if you're now thinking, oh, I want to keep losing weight, that means I really should eat less. I really shouldn't eat that particular food that I think is going to affect my body. And boom, you are in future deprivation. And in that particular moment, you're going to get as much as you can. That's where the binging will start, because to make up for what's going to happen in the future.
I was going to say, can you speak to that term, future deprivation?
Yeah. So there you are. You're really engaging in intuitive eating. It feels so wonderful. You're eating whatever you want. You decided you wanted a hot fudge sundae for breakfast, and you had it and you loved it. And it, you were so happy with it. And then, well, this comes in two ways. First, the way you're talking about, then it's like, oh gosh, my body is changing and I want to keep up this weight loss. And then those old thoughts from diet culture come in and say, you really shouldn't have a hot fudge sundae for breakfast. I mean, that's, Bam. So now you're thinking in the future, I won't get to have that hot fudge sundae. So now I might have 10 of them today. I'm exaggerating, but I would feel
Not
very
necessarily.
sick. Yeah, right. And I better get it in right now. So it's the mere perception of future deprivation, meaning at some time in the future, you're not going to let yourself have it. And that's because you want to continue on that weight loss path that you're noticing. The other piece of it is people who say, yeah, I'll give this intuitive eating thing a shot. If it doesn't work, then I know about, ABCD diets that are out there. And so it's never going to take hold if in one's mind, there's a sense that in the future, here's the future deprivation, you might try another diet, which will be depriving, absolutely depriving, and whether it's amounts or types of food. So it's this maybe subconscious sense of better get it in right now and conscious sense of it. So no, this is not an experiment in intuitive eating.
How do you handle the gap between somebody who wants to become an intuitive eater, but that body piece, the desire for weight loss is so strong? Where do you see people able to make that smaller than the desire to become the intuitive eater, or to put the food relationship first?
So I start with an enormous amount of compassion for them and ask them to have self-compassion for the fact that they want to lose weight because they're programmed that way. Diet culture, it's got cult in it. I mean, it really brainwashes people to feel that the only way they're going to be acceptable or that their life will be okay is if they lose weight. So I start with that so that they don't feel like there's a battle going on, like I might be upset with them because they're telling me that they want to lose weight. So we start there. And then go to what I like to look at as a very important word in all this is sustainability. It's if you continue to do whatever you're going to do for that goal of weight loss, is it sustainable? Have you had a history of sustainability in all of your attempts to lose weight? And people go, well, no, I always failed every diet. So if that's not sustainable, let's look at ways that you can live your life that will be sustainable and that will give you joy. And that weight loss piece, just put it on a back burner. It doesn't mean you're ever going to be pursuing it, but it does mean that we know society has put that into your head. And so you don't want to feel bad about yourself as a person because you've pulled that in. And people are kind of relieved when I talk about that because they're ashamed sometimes to tell me, but I want to lose weight. And I know, Elyse, you're not the weight loss person. So I never want anybody to feel bad about themselves for something that has been drained and thrown into their head over and over and over again. And then to look at the reality that every attempt that they've had to go toward that goal has always led them to feeling bad when they can't keep it up. So it helps them say, okay, yes, I can't do that anymore. I understand that I would like to lose weight, but right now I need to put my focus on my body and then coming to a place ultimately where I understand that my body is programmed, DNA programmed for whatever weight it's going to be. I have a slide on one of my talks that says you can't fool Mother Nature. We can't change that. But you see, to kind of fight with someone in the beginning, no, you shouldn't be thinking about weight loss, is only going to set up that autonomy piece, that reaction of, you can't tell me that, and I'm going to do it, and I'm going to make this intuitive eating thing help me go there. So instead, pulling back on that and just helping people come to that conclusion themselves that there is no viable way to get there. And then as they're healing, as they're finding the freedom, you use the word freedom, which is wonderful, and the joy that they have in trusting their bodies, little by little, they're less attached to that need to lose weight. And it just kind of diminishes and they're not held by it. So there's always something very psychological going on in the beginning. Well, there's always something psychological going on in every moment of our days. But I think it's important for people to not feel bad about themselves because that's how they're programmed. If they were born in an era, say when I saw an exhibit at LA County Museum of Art many years ago of Renoir's latest works. This was after his Impressionist era. And he drew and painted pictures of women that each woman took up a whole wall in, large women with large body parts that were just admired and desired. And, so yes, if you had been born in that era, this would not be your thought. And you are born in this era where unfortunately we have so much commentary out there about life is better when you're thinner. And The other piece I talk about is I completely understand why you wouldn't want to have to suffer from the oppression in this world. I'm a social justice advocate, and I help people understand that the oppression of people in larger bodies is traumatic and abusive. And so I understand why you're telling me you want to lose weight so that you don't have to live in the world being oppressed. I think when people know that I understand why, and and here I'm coming from someone who with thin privilege. And so I can't say to them, I understand your experience, but I understand the concept of not wanting to be oppressed in this world. And so this is what's driving you to that. And we're all working toward taking away the judgment, the weight stigma, the anti-fatism. It just helps people feel known and less ashamed. Shame is so much a part of diet culture, it's so much a part of, feeling bad in their bodies. And so to reduce that shame for their desire, but also to get them on the page of understanding what can they do in this life that they'll be able to do for the rest of their lives, to literally give them a better life, regardless of what size body they end up in.
Mm-hmm. That's why, as you were talking, I was thinking Sarah was going to ask, what is your favorite principle? I'm sorry, Sarah, I just eclipsed your question. I was gonna ask, what is your favorite principle? But she had asked me what mine was. She said, don't tell me until so here
Can
it
I
is.
Guess? Can I guess?
Yeah.
I would guess challenge the food police.
No.
Oh.
It's respect your body, because without that piece, I could not have gotten anywhere. That was always what held me back from being able to implement any of this, because I did not respect. I didn't want to where my natural set point was. And speaking of inner teen and the inner rebel, I think during that time it was like, no, that is not going to be where my body lands. That autonomy was really challenged in hearing, feeling like my body keeps wanting to be this size and I needed to come back here. And for me I was 40 by the time I reached a place of being able to say, maybe this is my body. And I had to have that piece. And that was when everything changed after that.
So important. And I think I was 37 before that happened for me too. Close
Takes
to 40.
time.
Yeah, but fortunately it sticks. I'm 78 now. And so that's, over 40 years later. By the way, just to be self-revealing, in my late 20s and early 30s, I had an eating disorder of dieting and binging and dieting and binging. It was something I actually blessed because it got me through some really hard times emotionally. And it led me to go back to graduate school at 30 to get my master's degree, because I'd been an elementary school teacher when I first came out of college. And so I bless it because it opened my eyes to a different world for me. And I started therapy at 35. A lot of things changed. So I would say sometime, maybe it was a little before 37, but I realized that I can't do this anymore. I cannot hate my body and hate parts of my body and try to change my body. It is going to be what it's going to be. Which, by the way, you two are very young, but it's an important piece of aging as well. I mean, the acceptance that our bodies are going to change throughout our lives. They're going to be different sizes at different times. They're going to have skin tone your skin, not tone, but your skin elasticity. Things change, and it is the way it is. And we have a culture that's so driven to trying to stay as young as you can and trying to, reverse any of the things that happen, natural things that happen with aging. So it goes along with this. I'm getting off on a tangent. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it folds over. It keeps the gift that keeps on giving when you accept your body or respect your body.
Yes.
And we've spoken before about almost this readiness that people need to get to. And as a practitioner, I'm a therapist, I can't get people to that place. So when people say to me, well, how were you able to give up trying to change your body? The only answer I have is because it was hurting too much to try. And so it was a humbling that happened where I finally had to say, I can't do this. But I was, every time you did the cycle, this time's going to be different. This time I'm just going to make sure that I carry on this path. And it's just not possible. So like you, I bless it. And I'm very grateful for the experience, because I think it changed me as a person for the better, actually. It's easier to say on this side of it. If you would like to come and connect with us in person, we're going to be in Dublin on Saturday, the 16th of September, 2023. We're going to be teaming up with the Intuitive Eating Hub for a workshop, followed by a social at a local Irish pub. We would love to meet you and hope you can join us.
And don't forget, you can still join our community of listeners by signing up on Patreon for access to monthly support calls, an active private Facebook group, and regular Ask Us Anything bonus calls. Links for Dublin and for the community are in the show notes.
And I want to add to this, as one goes through the stages of change and gets to that point where they're ready to make change, they often need to have some evidence for themselves, why what they've done in the past hasn't worked. But they don't have the evidence yet about the future. So I'm very much about motivational interviewing and helping people, come to that place where they know what they need. And I'm a registered dietitian nutritionist. I have a Master of Science degree in nutrition. There's a lot of scientific facts that people don't know. And so when I ask them, how do you feel about me telling you a few scientific facts? And they say, yeah, sure, tell me. I'm interested. It really helps them in their readiness. I'll give you an example. So, we live in this ridiculous carb-phobic culture. Carbs are the bad thing. Well, people don't know, typically, maybe some scientists do, but typically they don't know that the only form of energy that can cross over from your bloodstream into your brain is glucose. And glucose is sugar. It's your smallest form of carbohydrate. That's what the brain needs to function. And if it doesn't get it, it has to break down the body. And I won't go through all the science of that right now. But so people will sit back and go, oh, I didn't know that. Really? You mean carbs aren't bad? You mean there's a reason we need to have carbs? It helps them get to a point of saying, oh, okay, maybe I'm ready to say carbs are going to be okay and I'll include them. Because in this era, I've been through so many eras with this. There was an era where fat was like the worst thing that you could have. And then you go through carbs are good and then carbs are bad and then protein is good. And anyway, I just think that sometimes working with a dietitian as well, someone who is intuitive eating and health at every size informed, can just throw in a few scientific facts. And I do always ask permission before I do it, because if somebody doesn't want to hear it, it's like, yeah,
don't waste my breath.
That's not going to be helpful. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So this person asked this question and everyone replied going, that's an amazing question. And I think it is a good one that trips people up. And the question is, how can we reliably eat intuitively if we are subject to a processed food industry that purposely engineers and designs food to mess with our reward systems, e.g. the bliss point, the combination of fat and sugar that the brain rewards us for the most?
That has got so many parts to that question. Let's start with the very end part, that the brain rewards us. Our dopamine levels go up. Our dopamine levels go up with great music, with great sex, with a great sunrise or sunset. There's nothing wrong with our brain experiencing, a surge in dopamine because something tastes really good. The other piece of it is I question the science behind the fact that these foods are going to take over our lives. They're going to not allow us to have our own agency in our eating. If you really listen to your body and you are, allowing whatever foods sound good to you into your life, several things are going to happen. If you begin to eat some of these manufactured foods, let's say, and that's all you're eating all day because you're an intuitive eater now and you get to eat that all the time, there's going to be a moment when you're going to say, I don't feel very good. You're feeling, whether it's the lack of protein or whether it's the lack of fiber, or, you haven't gone to the bathroom in 4 days because you haven't eaten a piece of fruit or vegetable or a bean or a whole grain or whatever. As an intuitive eater, you're really in tune with your body. We call it interoceptive awareness. It's listening to what your body says. So I don't believe that we're being hijacked by this industry. I have every food in my house that I want to have. And frankly, I would never want to only eat those foods that are deemed manufactured to get you to be quote unquote addicted to them. I don't believe in that at all. Plus, with the full freedom to have whatever you want, habituation sets in. And so for your listeners, let me explain habituation. Habituation is the greater the stimulus, the less the response. So the more you have of something, the less forbidden it is, the more available it is to you. It kind of gets into it's okay. I don't really love this. I can't tell you how many clients have said, I thought my favorite food would be, I don't know, flaming hot Cheetos or whatever. And I started eating them. And after a while, it's like, my mouth didn't taste good or feel good. And because they have given themselves full freedom to continue to have them. So if they hold that narrative that they're being hijacked and this is going to lead them down this path of, never being able to tune into their bodies, I don't believe that's true. As full-blown intuitive eaters, you're going to notice how you feel. And it just doesn't feel good if you're not nourishing your body. It just doesn't feel good. So, but it takes a while to get to that point. That's why the last principle is gentle nutrition, which I never, ever go to until the very, very, very end. And sometimes not even ever, because I really believe we know what we need. I don't know. I just want to help your listeners understand that I don't believe that that's an impediment to intuitive eating.
Yeah. What I noticed, particularly in recovery, is that sometimes I would be okay around these foods, and other times I would feel completely out of control. So I'd certainly gone through cycles where I was like, the answer is I'm addicted to sugar, or I'm addicted to these processed foods and I need to get rid of them. But when I really started investigating, I'd done a lot of work on releasing the judgment and shame, so I could see it more clearly. What seemed dependent on my experience of these foods was my emotional state when I ate them. If I eat them in a really stressed state, and then I feel stressed about eating them, like you say, that interoceptive awareness, it's not there. I can't find the satisfaction. So for me, I really brought it back to one of the intentions I used to set myself whenever I was feeling wobbly to reset, if you like, was to say I can eat whatever I want. The only condition, if you like, I'm putting on myself is that I have to do my utmost to really enjoy it. That was it, because I can't binge and do that as well. Those things are just incompatible.
Right. And that requires staying present, doesn't it? In order to have that enjoyment, you want to stay present to the experience. So you're eating this food and you're not having all these thoughts, this is bad, this is wrong. You're really enjoying it. You're slowing down a bit so you can savor what the food is. And ultimately you get to that point where enough. I don't feel great, and I don't really want it as much because it's not forbidden anymore. So yes, absolutely. I agree with you. And to stay present to get to that place of being able to appreciate the satisfaction you're getting from the food.
What would you say to somebody who has, and I have several clients where this has become the conundrum, right? So there has been an honest and sincere journey through the intuitive eating principles, and there really has been a release of judgment and the food police. But the gentle nutrition component is not, it's a holding pattern there. And one of the questions that we received sort of echoes that sentiment, which was more thoughts on gentle movement and gentle nutrition when you've got maybe a fraught relationship with movement or nutritious foods because they're associated with dieting, and how to cross that bridge.
So I would stop trying to cross it, especially with the nutrition. Don't push it. Don't go there. That's why I say sometimes I don't even talk about it, because it takes a long time to heal from all those messages that you've had for years and years and years. And the more you try to push it, the more you're going to engage that rebellious teen that's going to go, no, I don't want to have that. And it'll be pushing off the time when you actually feel like it. I have clients, like I was talking to somebody just last night who said, gosh, I just made a bunch of vegetables for myself because I really like vegetables, but I haven't eaten them in years because vegetables were what I had to eat when I was dieting. And so she's been doing a lot of work with me and in her trauma therapy as well. And she's at a point where she can appreciate a vegetable, not because I said it's time for the principle of, gentle nutrition. How can we incorporate vegetables? Never would I say that. So it comes up. If someone were to say to me, Elyse, as I mentioned before, I haven't pooped in so many days. Any suggestions? I might teach them that fiber helps your GI tract, but I would never say go eat vegetables so that you can be healthy. I just hate that whole concept. So that's the piece with the food. So you don't push it. Don't worry about it. Someday you'll come, as my client did, to, I actually like some things. Another client was saying, I really love string beans. I never had string beans. But again, these are people who were dieting and told that the only thing they could eat were, the string beans or the, the fruit, the vegetables. And anyway, so, and then the movement part. Movement has to come to a place where it feels joyous, where it is something that feels the way a toddler feels. If you ever watch a toddler running around and jumping up and down and dancing because they hear music, without they're not doing this so that they can control the size of their bodies. They're doing this because it's a natural impulse to feel joy in movement. I'll give you a little example. When overnight I went from an in-person practice to an at-home Zoom practice because it was March of 2020. The very first, month of it, I was sitting and seeing one client after another on Zoom. Whereas in my office, I would get up, I would take a client out, I would bring another client in. So I was kind of every hour just getting up and walking back and forth. And I started to feel really sluggish and awful. And it hit me. Oh, maybe that's because I'm just sitting all day. So I got myself a standing desk. I'm actually standing right now. And it can go down if I don't feel like standing. I can sit with it. But it just changed everything. But it wasn't because I thought it is bad to sit all day. It was because my body started to feel sluggish because I didn't have the experience I was having in my office. And I had a pretty long haul to get to the waiting room and, back and forth. So, we want to listen to our bodies. And so do whatever feels good to your body. Do not go back to anything that was done for the purpose of weight loss or that was done because you were pushed to do it. I have a lot of clients whose families pushed them to be athletes as teenagers and, made them go to practice at 5 o'clock in the morning every day. And they just don't want to do that. But they think that going back into movement means they have to go back to something that they hated.
Do you have any advice for people who really struggle with the interoception awareness piece where they feel like they can't hear anything in their body, almost like they never have, how you can start to develop that and make it stronger?
Well, again, I help them see that they're trying to push something. They think they should be able to listen. That's where it goes back to where you maybe can't hear your hunger and fullness in the beginning. It's a natural process that ultimately, when you let those thoughts go that you should eat a certain way or you should move a certain way, or you will begin to hear that. I have really not met any client who ultimately doesn't say, yeah, I've had some hunger signals. Maybe they're not, the fullness is, it's taking a while because they're so used to binging. But I would like to talk to that person more and say, okay, you're telling me you never felt that. Well, you've seen any pictures of yourself, like home videos when you were a toddler? Well, yeah, I guess. I'm telling you that you as a toddler enjoyed running around, or you were hearing your body was driving you. You just weren't saying, I have to listen to what my body's telling me. I think the theme of what we're talking about in a lot of ways is stop trying to push things on yourself. Let it emerge naturally by looking at what tastes good, what feels good. It will lead you ultimately. I think that, again, I think that's a cover for thinking that you should hear your hunger and fullness signals right away.
It takes time for all of that to come about. And I think we circumvent that when we're shoulding or expecting too soon or pushing those things.
Yes.
And I feel like it probably will take longer than we want it to. But that is an imperative, that waiting, that patience is part of what we actually need.
Yes. And also for someone who's been undernourished, and undernourishment could be undernourished throughout the day and binging at night, but still, their bodies are not fully nourished throughout the day. As time goes on, as the body is further nourished, as the survival part of the brain starts to sense that enough food will come as time goes on, the signals do start to come because there's no urgency. Urgency is a feeling, and the survival part of the brain is just the instinctual part of the brain. And by the way, intuitive eating is not just instinct. Another misconception is that you don't even ever have to think. Just your body will just drive you to what you need. And that's not true. My favorite definition of intuitive eating, which I think I created, is a dynamic interplay of instinct, emotion, and thought. And that comes from the three parts of the brain that are operating at all times. The primitive part, the survival part, the instinctual part is what we call the reptilian brain. And that's what the dinosaurs had. And that was apparently the only brain functioning that they had. And it was the drive to survive. That's what got them to eat little weeds or whatever was around them to survive. But they didn't have the capacity to feel and to think. When mammals came around, we had this other part of the brain that was activated called the mammalian or limbic part of the brain. So that sits on top of the reptilian part, which is really on top of the brainstem, the reptilian or survival part of the brain, instinctual part. And then what sits on top of it and surrounds it is the mammalian or limbic brain, which is the seat of emotions and social behaviors. So if you have pets, you have cats, you have dogs, you have horses, you have, I don't know, sheep and pigs or whatever, they can feel, they have feelings. If you leave your pet at home for too long, even with a caregiver, they're mad at you when you come back. I mean, they have feelings, but they don't have the capacity, and they have the instinct to eat and survive. They don't have the capacity to talk about these feelings, to actually have the language for it. So that's what differentiates us as humans, is the thinking part. So that's why I like to say it's this dynamic interplay of the instinct to survive, the emotions that can affect your instincts, and then using the thinking part of your brain to make the best decisions and self-care for yourself. So it could be emotions, or it could be illness. And when I've had clients who had COVID and they lost taste and smell, nothing tasted good, which really affects the appetite, but they had to use that thinking part of their brain to say, I still need food, and get themselves to eat on a regular basis. When people aren't getting their hunger and fullness signals regularly, just knowing that the body needs food throughout the day, and the brain certainly needs the food, the brain's directing how the body is working, then they've got the complete sense of intuitive eating. So this misconception that it's just instinct, that doesn't go. I mean,
Right.
we know that when we're stressed and filled with anxiety, sometimes the appetite just goes away because you've got that sympathetic nervous system going. You're fleeing, or running, or you're freezing or whatever, and you can't be hungry during that time if you're running away from a tiger. So your appetite's gone, but you still have to know that you have to eat to take care of yourself. We unfortunately, this is a whole other subject, but we hold trauma in our bodies the way wild animals don't. They release the trauma when they're running away from the tiger.
This next question kind of ties in a little bit with what you're saying there, I think. So maybe it's a helpful segue from our community. If I binge or just overeat at night, I don't feel hungry for quite a long time the next day. It seems kinder to my body not to burden it with food when I'm still so full, but I wonder if that sends a restricting message. When you're talking about like thinking,
Okay,
emotions,
yes.
and instinct, I think this kind of makes them all intersect in situations like this, right?
Yeah. So we want to look back at what was the trigger for the binge, like I was talking earlier. Let's understand, was it that you didn't eat enough during the day? So if that is the case, because if we get into what we call primal hunger, where this instinctual part of the brain, it's like red alert, organism in danger, it releases chemicals that make you binge. There's something called neuropeptide Y, which literally sends you out to get as many calories and as much carbohydrate as you can, just for survival. So we first look at that. And then the question becomes, okay, if you don't eat the next day because you're still full from the night before, are you going to set up a pattern where every day, as time goes on, you're not eating enough during the day, you're binging at night, you don't feel good? If that's the case, then we really have to use that thinking part of the brain to say, okay, we need to eat throughout the day. Maybe we won't have an appetite. Maybe we won't have to eat, to the ultimate satisfaction in the day because we're already comfortably full or uncomfortably full and it doesn't taste as good, but we do need to eat. If it's not that, if the binging is coming from self-judgment, if the binging is coming from not having developed many coping mechanisms to help with emotions, if the binging is coming from not having made peace with food, that you really are binging because you're thinking, I should not be eating this food, and then, future deprivation, as I said, I won't eat it on Monday, so I better eat as much as I can tonight. Then you want to tease those things out and work on the pieces that led you to the binge, but you still do need to eat the next day. And it might not be comfortable, and that might be a motivator too, to eat enough so that you're not triggering the binging.
So would love to hear more on how to feel okay to say no to food, not in a restrictive way.
Well, that is powerful. Why are we saying no? And are you really not restricting? Are you wanting to say no because you actually think that you shouldn't be eating that food? So you really want to go deeply into whether you're still in some, restrictive thought process. If it is, no, I've had enough, I feel satisfied, I feel comfortably full, and I don't want to keep eating. This is one of my favorite things to talk about. I wrote an article called The Sadness of Saying Enough. And if any of your listeners want that article, write to me. I will send them the article. And the point of this article And it came from a teenage boy I worked with years ago who told me he wasn't an emotional eater. He never ate when he was upset. What did he do? He went and talked to his mom. Or he never ate when, he went through the emotions. No, I played with my dog. I played basketball. But he couldn't stop eating at his meals. But he said it wasn't emotional eating. And at one point I said to him, that's so interesting, because you're telling me that you're uncomfortably full. So does your body need that amount of food? Well, no. Okay, so if your body only needs a certain amount of food, but you're eating beyond that, what is the rest of that about? And he said, I don't want to have to feel sad that I have to stop. And that led me to writing this article. And I think it's human nature that we feel sad when some really wonderful, enjoyable experience is about to come to an end. It happens to me, and I read a lot of books. I love to read, and especially if I'm reading a really good novel, I can't wait to find out, the conclusion, what actually happened. And then I read the last page and I'm sad because I love this book so much. And what do? I say to myself, it's okay. This author has written 10 other books. I'm going to get another one. And the same thing with food. I'm eating this delicious meal. I ate everything that I wanted. And my body's telling me that if I continue to eat, I'm going to feel physically uncomfortable. So this is the point where I know I need to say no. And so I say, first acknowledge that you feel this sadness, that this wonderful experience is about to end. And then assure yourself that you get to eat many times during the day, whatever foods you want. You're going to have enjoyable experiences throughout the day. And you eat, as I say, whatever you want. So it's not the last time on earth you're going to eat that food. And then stand up, put the dish in the sink or whatever you're going to do. And you'll find that sadness leaves you very quickly. Go do something else at that moment. I call it emotion light. It's not the deep, deep emotions that come with trauma and, so many other experiences in life. This is a momentary feeling that comes up. I'm sad. This is over. Okay. It's okay. I get to eat again every time I want for the rest of my life, and it will pass. So maybe that will be helpful.
I call that the wistfulness of endings, whether it's a book or a vacation and there's a Japanese term for that. And it's existential sort of feeling. But I've heard it many times reflected in food and the ending of food. And it takes a bit of, it's easier to just keep eating, like to not stop that. And so there is some kind of proactiveness about saying this to yourself and to reassuring yourself that there will be more. But it can be just sort of a habit loop to get into of like just bypassing that to keep it comfortable.
And to recognize the trade-off. Yes, I can. I have autonomy. If I want to eat more and feel uncomfortably full, that's okay too. It's an autonomous choice. I remember being in a little cafe in Paris many years ago, and the food was so incredible and I was so full, but I ate every bite. And it was a choice because I knew that I was probably never going to find that place again. And I wanted every bite of that food. No judgment. It's a choice. So, it's a trade-off. Doing that all the time, you're not going to feel very good all the time. But maybe sometimes you do want to give yourself that, opportunity.
We've got one last question. You touched on this a little bit early on, but I think it's worth just looking at it slightly differently through the lens of this question. And it's, what about distracted eating? It's not mentioned in the 10 principles. I'm trying to make eating without distractions a non-negotiable while giving myself permission to eat what I want, but I often succumb to the lure of online advice columns.
Well, anything that's non-negotiable like that is a problem because you're going to rebel against it, number one. Number two, it's unrealistic that we can have no distractions while eating. Does that mean you never go out to eat with a friend, or with your family? Because it can be distracting. So to me, it's figuring out what you can do and still stay present with your food. I can go out to eat and still enjoy my meal and have a conversation with someone. I can read the newspaper in the morning while I'm eating breakfast, and it does not keep me, sometimes I just want to throw it away because of the news, but I know I can do that. Some people can't watch television and eat because they just get so thrown into the television. So they say to themselves, ultimately, maybe it's a good idea for me not to eat while I'm watching TV, but I can sit down at the table and read a magazine or a newspaper. So I think the person who asked this question, take a look at what you're saying by non-negotiable. You're making it such a rule. You've created your new rule. And what do we do with rules? We rebel against them. So take that out, ask yourself, what events actually make you so taken up by it that you cannot pay any attention to your food? One of them is, I will not eat while I'm on the telephone talking to someone. There is absolutely no way that I can enjoy my food if I'm on the phone eating. I'll get off the phone and the food's gone. And so I don't eat while I'm on the phone, but that's not a rule. It's, I want to really enjoy my food. So I'm going to enjoy it more if I'm not on the telephone, which is really different than sitting in a restaurant or sitting at a table across from someone at home even and talking. Because you're not sharing a meal with someone when you're on the phone with someone, you're just talking to them. So,
yeah, I love that. I
hope
think
that
it's such an
helps.
important point. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just genuinely curious, Elyse, when you and Evelyn wrote the book, what you imagined was possible could come out of this book compared to what is coming out of this book all these years later.
You know, I think we were in the present at the moment and not futurizing. And I think that we wanted to create a book that there had been no other dietitians who had written a book like this. There were some psychotherapists or lay people just talking about the idea of giving yourself permission to eat what you wanted, but it didn't go much further than that. So I think we were just so excited to offer people in that moment an alternative to dieting, an alternative to the torture they've been through. And it's kind of been an awesome experience to see how it's gone on year after year. The first edition came out in 1995. So we started writing it in 1993. And now the fourth edition was in 2020, I believe. And now we're going to be writing a second edition to the Intuitive Eating Workbook, which will come out in 24. I mean, it just keeps going and going. And it's a miracle. It's just a miracle. I think a lot of what happened, I'm often asked, what do I think happened? Why has it become even more popular? I think it got very connected with the Me Too movement and our politics in America, where we were, I mean, I don't know what's happening in the rest of the world, but in terms of us being told that we should look a certain way, being denigrated for our size, I won't mention the name of the person that led our country for a while. Anyway, who, we were, I think, very offended by the uprising and oppression in all ways. And I think that was a trigger for so many social justice issues, including, as I said, anti-fatism and weight stigma and bias and all of that. So I think it's really exploded around the last 3 years because of that. However, before 3 years, it still was selling. A publisher doesn't keep publishing books if it's not selling, because they like to make money. So clearly people were responding to it and they were finding it all over the place. So, but I don't really think we were thinking about what's going to happen 30 years from now. We were just in that moment.
Yeah. Well, you were interviewed by the New York Times, right? And
yes,
yeah,
we had
that was big.
It was on the front page of the online New York Times. I will say, unfortunately, as the article, it was wonderful in the beginning, as the article went on, the editor, not our writer was fantastic, but the editor wanted to throw in some controversial stuff toward the end of the article, and we didn't get a chance to, rebut it. But it was that. I just did an interview with the Wall Street Journal, and they have also done a great interview on intuitive eating. There's a lot of interest in it. Interest.
Yeah,
it's good for all of us.
It's thrilling.
Yeah. Yes, and I really appreciate you and everybody else who's driving the evidence-based part forward as well. Like, to really, let's give it credibility. Let's show rather than just tell, right?
Yeah, well, let me say this. I mean, there are at least 200 studies, evidence-based studies, really good research, not fringe research, that validates intuitive eating as an evidence-based process for increased mental and physical health. So you're not going to find that on any diet. There isn't any evidence that supports any diet for those things. So,
Elyse, this is just a little trivial question. What is your favorite food? As you're talking about the satisfaction, I was curious.
I think my favorite food is spaghetti. I mean, we don't call it spaghetti anymore. We call it pasta. But I grew up with, my grandmother made great spaghetti, and I just had it last night. I had a client visiting me from across the country, and we ended up going out to dinner, and I just had the best pasta. It was so good. I think that's my very favorite food. I used to say it was chocolate, but I disagree. I love chocolate, but I don't really want chocolate necessarily every day. Maybe I do a little bit, but I could eat pasta every single night for dinner. But then the habituation would set in, and then I would want something else. So what can I say? Yeah. Okay.
Oh, thank you.
You're
And where
welcome.
can people find you and learn about your workbook and anything else that you're working on?
Okay, so I have my own website, ElyseResch.com. There's an intuitive eating website that gives you some of the studies and more information, which is intuitiveeating.org. I am on Instagram, even though I don't know how to create content. I just put other people's wonderful things on my story and credit them, of course. So I'm at Elyse Resch on that. And in terms of the book's available at any bookstore that you have. And if they don't have it, then ask them to get it.
Thank you so much, Elyse, for joining us. We really, really appreciate having you and you sharing all your wisdom. It's great to hear it.
Thank you. I had such a good time with meeting both of you and talking about this. It's wonderful. So thank you for inviting me.
Great. Thanks for your time, Elyse. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.